Nick Reiner, the son of acclaimed director Rob Reiner, was back in court this afternoon for the second time. He did not enter a plea, and his arraignment was once again postponed. His attorney also asked to be replaced by a public defender. Here now to talk more about the next steps in the court proceedings is criminal defense attorney DavidPShapiro. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
What a big turn of events this morning. Now, this is Nick Reiner's second time appearing in court. As we mentioned, he did not enter a plea. It has been postponed. But a big shock that his defense attorney removes himself from this murder case. What was your reaction to this?
Yeah, a little bit interesting because we heard Alan Jackson showed up at the first arraignment, right? The first court date in December, excuse me. And when they continued it to today, made a representation that he and his firm were hired by Nick Reiner or someone on behalf of Nick Reiner to represent him. And then it was a complete 180 today. And not only did Alan Jackson and his team step down, it's not like a new privately retained attorney came in. At this point, Nick Reiner appears eligible for the services of the public defender in LA, and now they have subbed in as his new attorneys moving forward.
How will this affect his case? Because Alan Jackson is a high-profile attorney, very popular. He was defending Karen Reed in Boston. I think there was a mistrial, and also then she was acquitted for the second time. And now a public defender, Kimberly Green, taking over this case. How is this going to hurt his case?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily going to hurt his case just by the nature of the switch, because there's a couple of misconceptions out there about public defenders in general, right? First off is, oh, they're not as good as private attorneys. Well, it really depends who that private attorney is. And we have a saying at our firm that, you know, an average public defender is better than 85%, if not 90% or higher, of any privately retained attorney. Now, Alan Jackson is some pretty rare air, him and his firm, and what they've been able to accomplish. But he is going to get, he being Nick Reiner, is going to be assigned the best of the best within a very well-known and well-respected public defender's office. So I don't think there's necessarily going to be as big of a drop-off, if any, than people may think.
Okay, let's talk about the charges he's facing. Double murder.
Yeah, double murder makes it a capital eligible offense, meaning he could be legally facing the death penalty. Realistically, it's a whole other issue. But when the district attorney in Los Angeles filed not only murder charges, but the special allegation that more than one person was killed, pretty self-explanatory there, he now is death penalty eligible and is facing, even if he is spared the death penalty, is facing life without the possibility of parole if he's convicted of the substantive charges and the allegation.
Okay, he is charged with killing his parents, and looking at his background of his mental health, what do we know? Because there's a lot of speculation reports that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Yeah, a lot there, right? There's 17 some odd that we know of admissions and then ultimately leaving some semblance of treatment, whether it's for mental health, substance abuse, or a combination of the two. And that's going to play a large part in this case in really one of two ways moving forward. What's been worthy of what happened in December and what also happened in January today and what will likely happen in February is this whole, he has not yet entered an actual plea to the charges. A lot of times it's pretty self-explanatory. You show up, you're accused of a crime, you enter a not guilty plea. Whether you're guilty, whether you're not guilty, that gets played out over time. Here there's a potential with this mental health, what or what not his incapacity was at the time of these alleged murders, whether or not he may proceed by the route of not guilty by reason of insanity, and that takes his case in a totally different direction long term than if it's a more traditional double homicide route.
So looking at his health over the last decade and the events leading up to the alleged killings, can this actually be an insanity defense?
You know, again, I'm not privy to that specific information, but it's definitely something I'm sure that Alan Jackson and his team were exploring, and it's something that the newly appointed attorneys from the Public Defender's Office will look at, because if you are basically not guilty by reason of insanity, you're not convicted of the crime. Now, one thing that's worth noting about that is a lot of people may be, oh, that's just a cop-out, that's just a technicality in the law, he's going to get out. Well, he would never get out. He wouldn't be convicted. He would just be civilly committed to a mental facility for as long of a time in reality than he would have been had he been convicted of the underlying murders to begin with.
Yeah, and describe what an insanity defense would be, because a person pretty much has to prove that they did not know right from wrong at that moment.
Exactly. In that moment, it's a lower standard. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning that, you know, a lot of times prosecution will have the burden of proof, and when they say that, we mean proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In this instance, it's basically saying I didn't know right from wrong, I couldn't appreciate the difference, and it's a preponderance standard, so it's like a more likely than not lower burden of proof that the defendant actually has, and then it would ultimately be up to a jury if the case goes to trial. First step is he going to be found guilty, or is he going to plead guilty to the substantive offenses? And then second, is the jury going to buy the not guilty by reason of insanity? If they buy it, then it goes into that whole mental facility for an indefinite period of time based on the seriousness of this case. If they do not buy it, then he's looking at, as the case stands right now, capital murder.
Okay, before we go, when is his next hearing?
Next hearing is, I believe, on February 23rd. That'll be, for all intents and purposes, the first hearing where he will enter a plea likely at that time, finally, after all these months.
All right, criminal defense attorney David Shapiro, thank you so much for weighing in on the Reiner case.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We'll be right back.